21:30 Central Africa time. A very good evening to you. It's Friday night. You're watching The Globe on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight. Now, Ethiopia has been in the headlines recently for two things. One, the Grand Renaissance Dam. There's been negotiations taking place between Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt about the Nile. The talks resumed earlier this week, and the watchful eye of the AU chairperson, Cyril Ramaphosa, President Cyril Ramaphosa. So that's the one thing. The other, sadly, has been a disturbing situation in the northern part of the country, Tigray region, where the federal government has had to put in federal forces to put down what they've described as a rebellion. And we've seen tens of thousands of civilians fleeing into neighboring Sudan because of the unrest and the conflict that's been taking place. There's been fears that a civil war could break out in that part of the country. So I caught up with the Ethiopian Ambassador to South Africa, Dr. Shifrea Teklemariam, about the situation in the country. And this is how our conversation went. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time to talk to us about developments in your country. Let's begin with the federal forces that went into Tigray, in the northern part of the country. Why did the Prime Minister deploy forces into that region?
Thank you so much, Peter. I think it's very important to have this discussion clear and also get the public, particularly the public that's in the Republic of South Africa and elsewhere, to get the proper information on this. I think the very important reason why the federal government is intervening in the region is there is a confrontation. The current confrontation with the government and with the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, is about restoring the rule of law on one hand, and also about bringing the constitutional order back into place, and also an ending an impunity. So these are basically the reasons. As a background, since April 2018, the new government that is now bringing the deep transformational change in the country has gone through several reform initiatives, as you may know very well. The very first one is deep political reform, basically with political widening of political spaces, economic reforms, peace and stability, and also inclusive and reconciling spirit of all kinds of roadmap, including our neighboring countries like Eritrea and others. So the TPLF became an opposition since December 2019, when the regional coalition came into the same united party, which is called the Prosperity Party. Now the reason is since that formation, TPLF as an opposition party made several confrontation with the federal government. Number one is it became like, to say, a safe haven for all suspects of corruption and human rights violations, number one. The second one is it was violating all kinds of federal government institutions, rules and procedures. One of the example being, for example, conducting the regional election, when this was part of the federal government's mandate as it is. And the third one is there are also a number of investigations in different parts of the country through training, financing, and equipping. But all those were very much taken a case to be restrained by the federal government and give a room and the space for discussion and ideals to take place. But what happened in November 4 is that this force and the force that was trained and prepared by TPLF went to attack the northern command of the Ethiopian, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia Defense Force, which was very unfortunate. And this was like a red line for the governments after several extreme restraints not to engage on such kind of actions. And so the basic reason is to make sure the rule of law prevail, the constitutional order really takes place, and also an end for any kind of impunity in that region.
This sounds like the Tigray region is trying to rebel against the federal government and maybe even secede from the country.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. There are several constitutional provisions. Whenever you have anything in your mind, you can always work within the constitutional framework and then with the federal government. Even for secession, there are also secession procedures in the constitution itself. All those could have been the route and the roadmap that could have taken place. But on the other hand, this team, they were always declaring all kinds of black smearing and creating all kinds of chaos all over the nation. And they were not at all, and they were in defiance of all constitutional order. And finally, when they were waging a war against the federal government, and it looks they have basically out of all kinds of rules and orders of the constitutional scheme, to say.
Amnesty International are reporting that hundreds of people have been killed. Many have been hacked and stabbed to death. Do you have any idea who's doing this killing in that part of the country?
But as you said, now this team, as we speak, who is against all kinds of, who were actually accused of all kinds of corrupt and terror attacks here and there. There is no any disciplined behavior, to say, and they are also trying all kinds of mechanisms to make a hostage of around there. Of course, when they attacked the national command force at the northern part of the country, it means they wanted to take all kinds of artillery, military equipment in such a way that they will be preparing themselves for whatever they thought may be an exit plan. So it shouldn't be a surprise that this team, the TPLF team, who is orchestrating this kind of war against the federal government, can do everything. And I don't see that they may not be able to do this, because that's what they were planning, that's what they were preparing themselves, and I think that is what they are doing.
So is the federal government in control of the Tigray region as we speak? I see that the Prime Minister has appointed a new head of the region, Dr. Mulu Nega. Does that mean that the current structure of the Tigray government has been removed and that the Prime Minister, through Dr. Mulu Nega, is in control?
Yeah, sure. I think the procedure is the House of Federation has ordered or directed the executive organ to replace that the governance scheme in Tigray region. And with the order of the House of Federation, now the executive organ was preparing themselves to replace the provisional government there that will be accountable to the federal government. And as we speak, that is what it is taking place. I'm sure as we move on, and this is the process that shouldn't and that will not be taking any longer because the population and the peoples of, we have to separate two things here, Peter. We have to separate the people of Tigray or the residents of the Tigray vis-a-vis the TPLF team or group, to say. So the Tigray people definitely require all kinds of services, the government services, the social services, and economical services. So there is this order which is already given by the House of Federation to take place as soon as possible, and the new leadership will definitely make sure all order has taken place, and the rule of law, governance, and everything will come into regular norms and order as soon as possible.
Has the fighting stopped? Because we're seeing thousands of civilians fleeing into neighboring Sudan, and concerns by UN bodies that a humanitarian crisis is developing there.
Yeah, of course, as you said, Peter, this is now the basic reason of this confrontation is to create, to make sure the rule of law prevail and the constitutional order comes into place, and also any kind of impunity to come to end. So in doing so, one could expect in such confrontation, while the federal government is looking for doors, and this is an operation basically to look for, to end the defense against the constitutional order. And the humanitarian as well as other steps are also taken care very well by the National Defense Force as the operation proceeds.
So has the fighting stopped? Have the federal forces been able to quell this resistance by the TPLF?
The whole design is, it will not take longer, and it will be soon concluding itself. In that very process, the engagement, which is now continuing, will not take longer, and that's the plan which is taking place as we speak.
The Sudanese president is saying that you need to come back to the negotiating table. Is that something that Ethiopia is looking towards? I see that Debretsion Gebremichael, the former president of Tigray, and other elected officials have had their immunity stripped, which I guess points to some kind of legal action against them. Can you negotiate under this kind of circumstances?
Yeah, Peter, I think one of the conditions to say for any kinds of negotiation or mediation is that you have to make sure the rule of law and the constitutional order prevails. In the absence and then the lack of rule of law and the defiance of the constitutional order, and when there is no any let's say inclination to operate within given norms and practices, it's very difficult even to think about those kind of engagements. One would rationally think this is what has to be done and what has to take place. But on the other hand, if you don't have that framework, you when you negotiate or when you mediate something, you mediate with principles, rules, and a certain framework, and the framework is a rule of law and constitutional order. So when rule of law and constitutional order, and particularly defense to the constitution, is still in place, it's very difficult to think about these kinds of parameters as we speak. And again, everyone, in a given democratic circumstances, I think the rule of law is beyond everyone else. And the constitutions are the supreme law of the country. So when the rule of law is compromised and the constitutions are totally eroded, it will be even very difficult to think about such engagements at all. Of course, when the rule of law is in place, constitutional order is well in place, then I think the next step would be to discuss on those lines. But those conditions need to be met before even thinking about it.
So I guess the challenge that you have is that the TPLF, you might be able to remove the leadership, but there are people who still support this organization, and there are probably people in Tigray that are sympathetic towards them. How do you manage all of this? To get the people on the ground on board with this new law and order they're trying to impose, and have a lasting solution for the Tigray region?
Yet, Peter, again, when you are in power, and when you think that everyone is with yourself, particularly because of your undemocratic practices, you may think that you are supported by everyone else in the region or somewhere. But people may look supportive because of several reasons. The number one reason is when you are not supporting, if you have a threatening factor behind yourself, then basically you may pretend like you are supporting. But the mere fact is, by the way, this confrontation is not with the people of Tigray. It's not with the Tigrayans as such. This is a confrontation with the TPLF leadership, the core leadership. In fact, they are the ones who are orchestrating. They are probably the ones who are misinforming the people in Tigray against the federal government, as the federal government is trying to put a unitary government and trying to suppress their own language, culture, and as such, the federal government is trying to create the diversity we are in, which all of them are misinforming the public in such a way that the public will be with yourself. But all these lies and all this misinformation, when it's exposed, the fact is that, and when they have also a breathing space to decide and to choose whatever they want, then even the people in Tigray, even as they are doing today or as we speak, they will definitely go for a right choice. The right choice is having a widened political space, a right of being writing, speaking, whatever organizational aspect you want to proceed, which all of these are totally compromised as we speak. So the people of Tigray, definitely they will go for a choice of widened democratic space, widened economic space, widened social and political activities, peace and stability, and above all, development. I think the choice for everyone is to go through peace and development, and the region as a whole and the people in the region, they are denied of this widened space. As I said earlier, in April 2018, when the TPLF was actually part of the EPRDF, this was the various reviews that was conducted, and that was a common position, including the TPLF, that the political space is so narrow, skewed, and the political space is so challenging. No oppositions are allowed. Every opposition who named itself were in exile, and there are so many political prisoners, so and so on. There are rules and regulations that totally compromise one's being organizing itself in an opinion. So what happened is through well rectified and back to its rule of law and constitutional order, the people even in Tigray, for sure, even as today, they'll be choosing, they'll be supporting the right decision toward this democratization process, Peter.
All right, so the federal forces, who are they actually fighting in Tigray? Are these federal soldiers that are siding with the TPLF? Who are they? Who is wearing the uniforms in Tigray that is fighting the federal forces?
Since the reform process has taken place in Ethiopia, which we mentioned April 28 and then 2018, and also since the Prosperity Party formed since December 2019, the TPLF team was organizing various special forces, we call them, and also the militia elements who are basically prepared to confront someone somewhere, but no one thought that they are going to cross the red line, which is called, attacking the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia National Defense Force. So these are basically, we call them special forces, and also militias who are trained and indoctrinated for this purpose, and they are the ones who are now confronting. And as I said, there are people who talked about civil war and this and that. This is not civil war. This is operation to look for those who are defenders of the constitution, those who think that they don't have any impunity, so and they don't think rule of law and constitutional order really now matters for them. So as a matter of fact, they decline to respect all kinds of provisions and decisions given by the House of Federation and House of Parliamentarians. So these are the people who are fighting against the National Defense Force.
All right, so you talked about the TPLF perhaps not representing the people of Tigray, but there were elections that were held, as you said. Somebody must have voted for them. Who are these people that are voting, and did they not vote for the TPLF to represent them?
Yeah, the important background, as I said earlier, is that you may be going to the police station, I think, for two reasons. The first one is really to have what you call a democratic election. And the second one may be to conduct undemocratic election as well. The very reason I'm mentioning this is through what you call a networking mechanism that exists in the region, even what you think and what you feel and also what you discuss is totally under control. So the only choice you may have is to go there and to do what you are told to do so. So the very fact that they were at the police station, of course, which was an illegal, which was also said to be unconstitutional because the regional government didn't have a mandate of organizing an election commission at the regional level, because this is a function of a federal government, as it is a function of the National Election Board in the Republic of South Africa. So there is no such thing at all. But as I said, people were forced. In fact, they are networked. No one escaping from this purpose will have consequences. That the very reason people were at that very illegal police station, being cognizant of the fact that that was illegal.
All right. And then perhaps finally, in regards to the conflict in Tigray, the United Nations is asking the Ethiopian government to grant humanitarian access to the people in the region. Is that something you've been able to afford them? And is access to needy people possible in the middle of this conflict?
Yeah, Peter, it's, by the way, the culture, norm and practice of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia Defense Force that you respect all the time and with no exception, not even something happening in the country, even outside the country. When we were part of a peace building process being in the continent or out of the continent, to respect the humanitarian aspect of any kind of confrontation. So as we speak, the National Defense Force is also making sure that access is created for all kinds of humanitarian support and services, and this is within the belief and values of our National Defense Force.
All right. Another big issue for you that's been ongoing is the Grand Renaissance Dam. Negotiations have resumed with Egypt and Sudan. How are those negotiations proceeding, and are you seeing progress?
Thank you so much, Peter. Again, as we have been speaking some other time as well, I would like to start by applauding the role of the Republic of South Africa and the current chair of AU, Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, and his institution's role in bringing back this negotiation after 6 or 7 weeks of lapsing. And as we speak now, the negotiation already initiated, and it's in the process. As we now, the various technical teams, they worked on it, and then the process is going on. As we have said all the time, this is even though this is a hydroelectric dam, even though Ethiopia contributes to 85% of the water resources to it, but we feel this is also an African. So what the President Cyril Ramaphosa is doing currently through his leadership and AU mechanism is highly appreciated and highly recognized. In fact, it's respected that, as we have been saying, this is African challenge, African problems, need African solutions, and we respect and we would like to underline the legacy of resolving such challenge remain and should remain within the African continental reach, which the President, Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa is doing a wonderful job.
All right, but are you confident that this round of talks and negotiations will yield fruit? Because we've been here before, over years actually, to try and get to a resolution, but not quite getting there.
As we speak, Peter, I know this is the issue of trust and confidence among ourselves. My views, yes, it will yield definitely. What it requires is the preparedness of the member states to resolve such issues by their own. And since this is also beneficial for all of us, it's not only for Ethiopia, it benefits of course, to Ethiopia, to Sudan, Egypt. This is an existential question for all of us. What it requires is now the spirit of sharing and caring, with the spirit of cooperation. Once we have on those lines, there is no any reason why we shouldn't come into an agreement. Of course, as we speak, in the first stage of filling of the water has already taken place, the 4.9 billion cubic meters. And when that happened, there was no any damage that has taken place in any of these countries. And surprisingly enough, the amount of rainwater that happened this year, it created so many flooding and loss of human lives, and also resources. If this dam was really in place in its complete and full force, in fact, it has saved so many lives as well. The control of flooding, control of siltation, improving the performance of the various dams at the lower riparian countries. And of course, the energy production itself could have brought, in fact, more and more benefit for all of us. So my feeling is there is no any reason why we cannot reach into agreement. And as we speak, the current intervention by the Republic of South Africa, the Africa Union intervention, is one thing which all of us need to buy, so that we also show the respect to the African mechanism, African sovereignty, African unity, and also the African citizenship without going and without moving anywhere else as citizens of this continent.
All right, that was Ethiopia's ambassador to South Africa, Dr. Shifrea Teklemariam, speaking to me a little bit earlier today about the concerning situation in the north of his country, Tigray, and also the progress being made in terms of the Grand Renaissance Dam and the Nile, dealing with Egypt and Sudan. All right, we'll have another Friday night conversation with you next week. And so far, it looks like we'll be talking to the Tanzanian ambassador. Recently held elections saw the president get another 5-year term, but there are other issues, and we'll delve into those next week at the same time.